Greetings, gumshoes, and welcome to another episode of Silver Screen Sleuths, the podcast where I, Emily Edwards, a mystery author, talk to other mystery authors about mystery movies and television shows. It is a complicated log line that's not an easy pitch, but the good news is that mystery writers get it, and they're very happy to join me on the show. With me today, we have a delightful author that I'm very excited to chat with. Olesya Lyuzna. Oh my God, I screwed it up, even though you just told me how to pronounce it 2 seconds ago. I'm so sorry. Say it for me again, please. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Olesya Lyuzna.
Olesya Lyuzna. Close enough. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm trying.
Perfect.
I feel so shitty when I do stuff like this. I'm so sorry. How are ya?
I'm fantastic, Emily. Thank you for having me.
That horrible, horrible introduction that I'm going to keep because it makes me look really crappy. And I'm always just like, you know what? We were introduced sort of through the internet thanks to my longtime friend, Nakesa Afia, who was on a couple of weeks ago to talk about Dial M for Murder. And you guys know each other from, are you also Canadian?
Yes. Yeah. So we have the sort of fortune of being two 1920s mystery writers, both based in Toronto. And so we met through a mutual friend who said, hey, I know someone who writes in the same genre. I think you'll like her. And we've been best friends ever since. So yeah.
That is great. So cool. Like your book series is, okay, so both of you have like the greatest covers and you just have like, and you have a new book out now and the cover is just absolutely just like gorgeous, breathtakingly cool. Can you tell us a little bit about your series, your sleuth, and why you chose the 1920s?
First of all, the cover for my latest book, Liars in Paradise, is pink, which made me personally very happy. So there's that going for it. So I write the Ginny Duggan mysteries. I have 2 books out so far. Glitter in the Dark is the first, and Liars in Paradise came out just now in August 2026. And it follows Ginny Duggan, who is a messy bisexual advice columnist turned sleuth. So she drinks a lot, she does drugs, she parties, she falls for all the wrong people, but ultimately at the end of the day, she does solve the crime, for better or worse. And it's just been a lot of fun writing her. I think, so I started this series during the pandemic, which was my sort of creative awakening, I guess, as for many of us, I think. And I was just, yearning for the parties, for the people. And I feel like that really comes through, especially in the first book. I wanted to get out of the 2020s and into another decade that's a bit more fun and less locked down. And the 1920s have always drawn me. It's kind of hard to say why the 20s specifically. I've pondered this here and there in interviews and just on my own time. I've just always loved, the fashion, the music, the slang. And the more I learn about it too, the more kind of parallels I find with the modern age. So I always kind of just want to make it feel fresh and fun and modern for people reading it today. And to kind of make historical fiction feel more fun. Because I think many people have a bit of a prejudice against it. It's historical. So why do I need to read this? This happened 100 years ago. So that's kind of my reason why, I guess, for writing the series.
Totally. I also love delving into like the language and just taking people that we know and putting them into sort of situations or context that a lot of people really, really misread. So like my series takes place in the 1950s, 1920s is the exact same way, which is a lot of people think that, everything was Victorian, where you have like the staid, very like, we don't talk about bodies, we don't talk about sex, we don't talk about drugs, we don't talk about drinking, just that very strict understanding of manners and the way people interact. And, it's like the 1920s was wild everywhere. It was so similar to now. Everybody's flush with money and then suddenly not flush with money, and dealing with, restrictions on intoxicants and sex or no restrictions on intoxicants and sex and things like that. And it's just a really, really interesting time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's just so interesting bringing things to light that, might be forgotten through the years. One big thing that I think not many people know is how vibrant queer culture was, especially in, the bigger cities like New York, where most of my books are set. There was this drag ball at Hamilton Lodge that started in the mid 19th century and kept going. And by the late 20s, it reached like 7,000 people. And so people would show up in these elaborate costumes. It was really this event, not just for the queer community, but kind of beyond. It was sort of the place to be, and the cops would actually kind of protect the attendees rather than try to break it up. So I think showing these like little flashes of, not just the repression, which I think is also important to kind of show how that evolves, but also the glimmers of hope and the vibrancy there. I think that's really affirming and empowering for people reading it today, where, history is very much cyclical and it's not just like a straight line going in one direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, especially when the 1920s, when you're talking about like the interwar periods, where you have the modernists who are really trying to push, they've lived through World War I, and they've lived through all of this like huge trauma, and it really affects how they want to, position the future and how they want to to mold the future so that never happens again. And of course, in the 1920s, you're already starting to see grumblings of Europe, going down the fascism hole that it's going to go down in about 10 years. And that sort of helplessness that a lot of the people were feeling in those interwar years of really, really trying to, punt the ball down the field as much as possible when it comes to progress. But also at the same time, creating laws about, that is the time. This is just a diatribe that I'm going on. But, it's also the time of like extreme eugenics and playing around with things of like, who is the right person that we want to take into the future. It's such an interesting time to set anything, because all of those things are happening politically all at once. And then by the time the 1950s roll around, after the Second World War, everybody was like, no experimentation, nothing different, nothing unusual, nothing that is aberrant. We're just going to try to erase all of that from culture. And it's just a really, really interesting short time span for all of that to happen.
Yeah. It's surprising that so much happens so quickly. I always kind of just marvel, even within, a couple of years, so many changes, new laws, changes in attitudes. I think it makes me reflect sort of differently on sort of the recent past as well. And it makes me wonder how people will think about our decade in hindsight, which I don't know if that's a happy or a scary topic to descend on, but it makes you wonder,
Drag ball is a really interesting thing to choose up or to pick up, because that's so fascinating. I did not know about that. But, you also think about the introduction of, ball culture in the late 1980s, early 1990s queer space. And of course, like Paris is Burning is such like an absolutely essential watch to understand of just like the underground queer culture that's always been in existence and cannot get stifled no matter how much people try. It's just I had no idea that rooted back all the way even into the 1920s and possibly even earlier.
It's really fascinating. I think the more you dig, the more you kind of learn. And I think even the fact that the drag ball started up in the mid 19th century surprised me initially. I think they were started by a Black fraternity, and they were allowed to go on for all these years, again, like throughout sort of the Victorian years, which many people would probably not equate with drag balls happening anywhere. So I don't know as much about the earlier centuries as I do about the 20s, but it makes me curious to, keep digging and see how far we can get.
Is so cool. I'm going to go and snap up your books, because that is just like absolutely fascinating. I'm just so excited about that. And then what's weird is that, Witness for the Prosecution, which is the movie that we're talking about today, it written by Agatha Christie in 1925 as a short story, by Agatha Christie as a play in the early 1950s, and then turned into this movie by the late 1950s. And it is also something that really, really plays with staid gender roles and just marriage as a construct.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating. Like, you gave me a couple movies that you were interested in talking about, and why did Witness for the Prosecution kind of like come onto the list?
I've been on a very big Billy Wilder kick. I feel like, I've been savoring his movies slowly throughout my lifetime. I think my first one was probably Double Indemnity because, I'm a big noir girl and that was sort of the thing to watch. But I feel almost like I don't want to run out of Billy Wilder movies, and eventually I will. I feel that way with some books too, especially with authors who are no longer with us. It's like I just want to really take my time because one day this will all end. But anyway, on a lighter note, I'd seen his noirs, I'd seen his comedies sort of on the more screwball side. And then this movie just kind of came across, caught my eye because I am a big Tyrone Power fangirl.
Yes.
So I saw a lot of his movies from the sort of earlier years, the 30s, the 40s. He's very much kind of like a pretty boy. And I was reading all these kind of old Hollywood books and memoirs about how badly he was trying to break out of that role and how studios wouldn't cast him as anything other than a pretty boy. He served in the war. He kind of broke out of it with Nightmare Alley, but that movie wasn't promoted as much. So a lot of frustration. So I was just really excited to see him in this role that I think is just so perfect for him. He's still very much like the charmer, but there's, an edge there. And yeah, this is probably, I can't really think of too many courtroom dramas that I've personally seen. So I'm by no means an expert, but this one, something about it just caught my eye. I feel like it's very theatrical. It feels very much like maybe it's the play underneath it all, but there's something very dramatic about it. Do you kind of get that too?
Totally. I really didn't realize just how much of the text and how much of the screen time was going to be taking place in this extremely foreign to me court environment, because, you go into courts in the US at least, and it's shockingly informal. Most people are there. Your jury is not in suits and ties. They're trying. I just had jury duty last year. I'm going through voir dire, and they didn't choose me. I don't want to say thankfully, but they didn't choose me. It's very hard to apparently get chosen for a jury if you're a crime writer when you tell them that that's your job.
Oh, no.
And didn't get chosen. But, in LA, the courtrooms are extremely dirty. There's tech everywhere. It's freezing cold. So everybody is trying not to shiver while they're telling everybody and it's just a tumultuous, unpleasant experience. And then when you go through this, you're seeing just the formality of it with the wigs and the robes and and he's standing up, in the box the entire time. And it just feels so regal in a way that, courtroom stuff in America, or at least media now, does not feel even remotely have that semblance of, and then we might take you out to the platform and behead you at the end, which, for some reason, all British courtroom stuff seems to have.
I got that same feeling too. And I feel like at the end of it too, I had to look up how much of it was sort of contrived for the movie and how much of it was actually kind of conventional for British courtrooms. My favorite part was how they addressed each other as my learned friend.
Yes!
I thought that they were just being really kind of snippy and sarcastic. I kind of felt like it was, an improvisation, but apparently that's conventional in British courtrooms, which I also thought was very funny because I could picture, them saying that in very different tones of voice, like in the movie, right?
Yeah. Totally. I'm not a lawyer, and I've been in courts twice in my entire life, and both of the time it was me not getting chosen for a jury. So I've never experienced this, and I can only imagine how daunting, because Trump Power is so cavalier when his character is introduced. He's just my wife suggested I get a lawyer. She's a dumb broad, and you're just he's just so this blasé, nothing's going to stick to me. I'm made of Teflon. I'm Trump Power. And you're just kind of I love this characterization of it. And as a person who heads up for a 70-year-old movie is very guilty throughout the entire thing. It's such an interesting thing for Agatha Christie to write, who is an extremely moralizing author. She is very happy to tell you when someone's guilty that she thinks they're guilty and they should go to jail forever.
Yes.
So I was wondering, had you read the story or the play that this is based off of before? haven't.
I went
Okay.
in fully blind and I hadn't looked up any spoilers or anything. So it was actually kind of insane. I feel like I went into it with, I mean, I knew it was based on an Agatha Christie story and play, but I still, it's an older movie. You kind of get a little smug as a modern viewer. You think, I've seen it all. I've seen all the twists, but still,
Yeah.
the like multiple twists. And I think what especially shocked me was like the character work, because each character is kind of like multiple things at the same time, but at the same time they don't seem inconsistent. So they're kind of like consistently inconsistent, I want to
Yeah.
say. Yeah, and I think that takes a lot of work, just for the script and also for the director and for the actors. And I just kept kind of rewatching it to figure out how they were able to do it. Because, like you said, with Tyrone Power's character, you can believe different things at different parts of the movie, and at the same time, it all makes sense at the end. It's all very consistent in its way, which I thought was remarkable.
Yeah, every thread gets sewn up at the end, which is kind of unusual for movies of this age. I feel like Billy Wilder, who co-wrote, adapted it to screen, and then there was another screenplay sort of written off of his adaptation. It's very complicated. WGA rules are all over the place. But Billy Wilder had basically shepherded this from play to screen and then ended up directing it. And, he's such an incredible like auteur levels of, we don't use that word for like, old Hollywood guys. He's so adept at translating things to screen and building that tension and really driving home the fact that these are no good people. And everybody in the scene has their own reasons for being there. And I think that Charles Laughton's character, who is like the main barrister, who just survived a heart attack and is just so ready to prove to his nurse, Miss Plimsoll, who's played by his actual real life wife, Elsa Lanchester.
I love that so much. Oh my God.
And so when they're bickering, it is the most realistic, like married people bickering I've ever seen for screen. And he's so damned proud of himself that he is going to go back and going to do this no matter what his bitch wife says, and it's really comical the way that they fight and how over the top they are on screen in a way that was like almost uncomfortable for me while watching.
Yeah, I agree. I think the first 15 minutes of the movie feel sort of different from the rest and maybe almost misleading. And I think, Billy Wilder could have gone so many different ways with it, right? You have your barrister, you have your case, bring in Leonard Vole and let's get on with it, right?
Yeah.
Instead, he takes all this time to give us, I don't want to call it exposition because I feel like it's all useful, right? But we really get to know Charles Laughton's character. He's this crotchety guy. He doesn't even want to take the case at first. My favorite is just, the lengths he will go to get a cigar. And that's like the motivation to even have the conversation with like Leonard Vole's representative is the guy has the cigars in his pocket and the camera zoom into those cigars. Hilarious. So it's all very real, all very like lived in, and so many like fun little touches, like the chair, the motorized chair that goes up the stairs, and how much he enjoys going up and down. Like all these points are kind of, they're not essential to the plot, but so essential to the character. And I think the bickering plays the same part too. Like we kind of see him in this more casual environment, and it's really funny, but very different, I think, tone wise from the actual, the case and how he acts during the case. So I found that pretty interesting.
Yeah, no, it makes me think about someone who writes books this day and age. And I'm like, our editors would make us cut that out. You know what I mean?
I
like
know.
so much. It's very odd now that like the pacing of things requires you to basically, if you could have the murder happen on the first page of your book, editors would be like, finally, you nailed it. You know what I mean? Like the amount of buildup that we're allowed now in narratives is extremely small. And I wonder how much, the runtime for this movie is about 2 hours. And so it's much longer than modern movies now. Like when you are writing a script, you're expected to have things that are 90 pages or less, and that's a minute per page essentially. So you are shooting for 90 minutes or less. Just people have no attention span. And I was noticing just how kind of bored I was for the first, the first 15 minutes when they're doing all these hijinks. And I'm just like, do we frickin' need this? And the answer is yes, because it's adorable. And it really actually lends like so much understanding to why the barrister does what he does at the end of the movie. And which we'll get to later. And it's really delightful. And, but like you're saying, like it kind of messes with your understanding of the tone of the movie because they're acting extremely broadly. Like Charles Laughton and Elsa Lanchester were old enough. I mean, Elsa Lanchester is best known for being the Bride of Frankenstein. We're talking like silent movie style grandiosity in emotions and lines and movements and delivery. And it's a little off-putting to me, at least, as like a modern audience. I was just like, it feels almost like a British pantomime kind of like levels of like, ha 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 hijinks that happen in the early parts of the movie. And I don't know, was it making you uncomfortable at all? Or is that just like me really going for like, just get to the noir already, Billy?
I mean, I think I've also reached that point where I'm like, where's the body? Just give me a body. And I think it's very much like you said, what modern movies and books prime us for, because attention spans are getting shorter. You can make it, like real size, bite-sized. Ideally, that's best. I do feel like I was annoyed, but I think I would have been annoyed if the movie weren't as good as it was, because I noticed this a lot just across the board in older movies, that they are slower. But then I feel like the quality of the script and the acting kind of makes or breaks it for me, where here I was like, okay. I think as soon as Leonard Vole came in, and then especially, I think the moment that clinched it for me was Marlene Dietrich's entrance.
Oh my God.
That's kind of where everything sort of starts turning, I think, because until then it's kind of, he's like, I don't know, I'm fine, I'm innocent, don't bother. And then we have all the hijinks, and then boom, his wife shows up on the scene, and it's all kind of a little mysterious, a little unclear.
She's incredible. And there's no other word to describe Marlene Dietrich walking in. She's so tall, and she has that bearing, and her shoulders are so wide and so square, and she's got the cheekbones and the jawline, and you're just like, oh my God, you're a goddess. And she walks into this room with Trump Howard does not even try to put on a British accent. He's just American the entire time. And, but you have like the two, like kind of all the sort of British stereotypes that they're playing into with the barrister and the people and the old ancient men who work in his office. And then like the older nurse who's very fluffy, Miss Marple, overbearing. And so they're not really painting British people in a particularly positive light, or at least not aging well 70 years later. So you have like the nefarious, shitty American, and then you have these kind of like out of touch British people. And then you have Marlene Dietrich walks in, and she's just like, I'm the only person who knows the way of the world. And you're just like, I love you so much.
I know.
She's so commanding.
I don't know how she does that. I feel like, I mean, she was unique, I feel like, for her time and her cohort of actors, but I also feel like it's this added sort of older Hollywood mystique that I don't know of many actresses today. Like if we were doing a remake of Witness for the Prosecution, who has that aura,
There's no one. Like there's absolutely no one who has just that absolute, like, because I'm thinking, like, obviously he did Double Indemnity, which has Barbara Stanwyck in it, who also has that sort of like, I love Barbara Stanwyck. Our politics are miles apart. She was like super deeply like conservative Republican, don't pay for anybody. I bootstrapped it, and why would I help anybody else in the future? And I'm just kind of like, screw you, Stanny. But like her film presence is that just like, I walk into a room and no matter if it's comedy, drama, whatever, I am in charge of this scene. And Dietrich has obviously that same uncanny ability. Like her secondary scene, which is like when you introduce her character to Vole, to Leonard, and she's playing an accordion and essentially getting sexually assaulted by a randy crowd of soldiers. And she still manages to have this unbelievable dignity when someone
Yes.
rips her clothing off. And you're just like, I believe that Marlene Dietrich can survive that and come out on top. Like she
Mm-hmm.
has that uncanny ability to rise above.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it couldn't have been anybody else, I think, in that part. Also, I mean, fun fact for that scene, I'm not sure if that scene was written, before or later, but I caught this fact that the scene with the ripped pants required 145 extras, 38 stuntmen, and $90,000, and the goal was to show one of her famous legs.
Huh?
So I feel like I mean it makes sense to the plot, I guess, ish, but I feel like there was intention there too.
Oh yeah, like it's this really interesting way to be like, oh, he's coming to rescue her, but because it's Marlene Dietrich, she doesn't need rescuing, and she's allowing herself to be rescued by this
Yes.
man. She's like, you want to feel something. You look like an American GI who's got access to coffee, sugar, tea, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
like things that I need while living in my bombed out home that you all did to me. And she's like, fine. It's so easily set up as a scene of mutual use that
Mm-hmm.
like it's again, only Billy Wilder or a director of that caliber could set up that scene, because I don't know about you, there was no sex in those scenes whatsoever. It was
Mm-hmm.
so anti-romantic.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, did you get any chemistry between them at all?
No, it was kind of strange. Like you said, it felt very transactional to me, and I think it's funny because I guess he is compelled by her, but I almost feel like he's compelled by her presence and the attention she's getting from everybody else. Like I don't really see romance or sexual attraction necessarily. I mean, attraction probably, but it's very much, she is the star and he kind of like wants her as the star.
Yeah, because
And
other men want her.
exactly, exactly. And the other thing that I found interesting about that scene was that it felt like a bit of a clue into his character where the men are attacking her and he does absolutely nothing to like stop
Yeah.
them. But he
Yeah.
kind of like leaves and then comes back when she's alone. And that felt very calculated to me and sort of cowardly, I guess, or maybe smart. I don't know, depending on how you're looking at it. But
Totally.
that kind of guy.
Yeah, no, you're right. Because, like, if you think about, like, American war hero, he's going to go in there. Like, if you give
Yeah,
that part to Cary Grant or, like, Rock
Mhm.
Hudson or something like that, they're going to break apart the men and start throwing punches to, like,
Yeah.
save this woman's honor. And he's just like, I'm going to stand back until they're done doing whatever they want to this broad. And you're just kind of like, that's really evil. Like, but he's just going to go in there and supposedly pick up the pieces until he realizes that like it didn't shatter her. And then he's totally intrigued by the fact that this woman has the ability to be pawed at to the extent that she has been. The entire bar is destroyed and she's still walking around as though like she's completely unscathed. She's incredible in this movie.
Yes. Yes. No, exactly.
Which is why it is not at all surprising when like our first twist kind of happens. And there's something so modern about this. It's like we're talking in the era of Gone Girl being named like the best thriller of the 21st century, which I think is totally well deserved. And then we're so used to now these huge like what's gonna happen twists that happen on screen. And I can only imagine that her coming in as the titular witness for the prosecution against her husband, air quotes, it was so shocking to Hays Code era audiences where wifeys are just supposed to be good little wifeys and nothing else. So did you know the twist before you kind of started watching the movie?
No, I mean, I feel like part of me wondered because Dietrich is such a strong character that I could not imagine her just playing, a meek wifey. At the same time, as like maybe that's the twist. I
Hmm.
think for me, it honestly came even earlier where like I think the first like line from her or whatever, Charles Laughton's like, oh, there's a lot of to do about her being a foreigner. She's like, oh, these foreign wives, I'll have to bring the smelling salts. She'll be so hysterical. And she's like, no, like I don't need that. Or like the smelling salts puff up my face or something
Yeah.
completely cold, like unemotional, unbothered. And then I think the first point where she's just like, she can neither confirm nor deny whether her husband came home. That's what he told her to say. So I feel like that first element of doubt as to, what her intentions are, that was quite surprising to me because she is who the whole sort of testimony may or may not hinge on. And her testifying for the prosecution was kind of crazy and really unexpected. Yeah. So I don't know. On the one hand, since it was Dietrich, I couldn't really picture her kind of standing by her man until
No.
the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that would be very out of character. But yeah, I did read this tidbit. So because her performance, and I mean there is, well, I think we'll probably get to one of the
Yeah.
spoilers on the complexity of her performance or performances, but she was so sure that she would get nominated for an Oscar, but I think she didn't because they were afraid to like give away the twist, to like show that her role is more
Yeah.
than just and she even like pre-recorded a video for like a
Oh.
Vegas event or something. She's like, oh, I've been nominated, but then she didn't get nominated. And she was like crushed, which I can imagine because she did so well.
Yeah, it's a brilliant performance from her. And I should probably look up to see who was nominated for Best Actress, after 1957 because she wasn't. And, the twist, again, sorry guys, 70-year-old movie, you're just going to have to deal with this, of, she pretends to be a Cockney woman, admittedly, Cockney accent, not Marlene Dietrich's strong suit, but she does a good job of it. She puts on this disguise and she calls the barrister, the defense lawyer, to this seedy bar. And she's just like, I happen to have, this is so Agatha Christie, where she's just like, some like urchin happens to have, the information we need. And she hands over these love letters from Marlene Dietrich's wife character to this random man named Max. And she's like, I'm going to lie on the stand and then we can be together forever. And by the introduction of these letters to the defense as evidence, Vole, I love that he's named after a rat. Vole gets, acquitted, and because of the laws of double jeopardy, he can't be tried again. And, even though he obviously murdered this poor woman, this older woman who left him boatloads of cash. And she's just like, now we can run away together forever. And apparently they really did not want to spoil the fact that she plays these dual characters, both the German wife and the Cockney urchin who just happens to stumble upon unmailed letters between this woman and her non-existent boyfriend. And I feel so bad because she does deliver everything flawlessly. She is incredible in this movie. And it's one of those things where you kind of realize that in the 1950s, the Oscars were a marketing tool, but not to the extent that they are today. And that we're used to seeing, like, the second it gets nominated for something, it's like Oscar nominated, like whatever, even it's like you got nominated for sound design. Like, it's not the same thing as like Best Picture. What the hell are you talking about? Oscar nominated Transformers movie. Like, it's sound mixing. I'm proud for the mixers, but it's not the same thing. Like, but they didn't do that with this, which is just absolutely kind of bananas.
Mm-hmm. And I think kind of coming back to that very like Christie-ish twist with the urchin coming in, I feel like I personally didn't recognize her when she was in disguise. And later I was really shocked by the twist. But the one thing that gave me pause was like, how late are you able to enter things into evidence during a trial?
Right?
Because it's just like they're about to give their final statements. And then Charles Laughton's character is like, wait, I have these letters. And then they just go ahead with it.
Yeah, I know. And I love how many old things kind of rely on handwriting as like something that we're gonna, it's definitely her handwriting, and you're just like, no, that's not evidence. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I'm
Yeah.
trying to look up to see who was nominated for Best Actress, because it should have been Marlene Dietrich, and it absolutely wasn't. So, Best Actress nominees for movies that came out in 1957 were Lana Turner for Peyton Place, Elizabeth Taylor in Raintree Country, which I've never heard of, Anna Magnani for Wild as the Wind, Deborah Carr for Heaven Knows, and the winner was Joanne Woodward for The Three Faces of Eve. I am not an expert in classic cinema, and I have never heard of any of these movies. And I feel, I've heard of Peyton Place, obviously, but like,
same.
other than that, I got nothing.
Yeah. I mean, judging based on the titles, I feel these feel more melodrama to me. I might be totally, off base, but I wonder if there's something to that.
Yeah.
Like, were you more likely to be nominated as a woman if you were playing the lead in like a very sort of women's film?
Oh, yeah. No, that's a really good point. Because this movie, Witness for the Prosecution, was nominated for boatloads of Oscars. So it was nominated for Best Picture, it was nominated for Best Director, Best Actor for Charles Laughton, not for Tyrone Power, Best Supporting Actress for Elsa Lanchester, Best Film Editing, and Best Sound Recording, which is, again, really weird when you think about like these 1950s movies. Yeah. No. Yeah. They didn't win any. Yeah. I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah, poor Tron Power, who got absolutely nothing for this, and poor Marlene Dietrich, who, just acts her pants off on this and just playing so many different characters. And, it reminds me of the movie that we just talked about, which is Glass Onion, which is like, you have Janelle Monáe, who is the linchpin of this entire thing. And she's playing, the sister, and then she's playing the deceased sister. And she's playing, the sister playing the deceased sister. And you have that sort of multiple levels of who she's pretending to be on screen. And I feel like Marlene Dietrich is, this character is somewhat the originator of that, where she's like, I'm playing the dutiful wife. I'm playing the ice cold queen bitch who will lie on the stand, and force tears into my eyes. Or I'm playing someone who actually loves the character that she's supposedly married to. Like at the end, when he gets acquitted and he comes back into the courtroom and they're both in the courtroom at the same time. And she's like, oh, thank God. Like, I will do my time for perjury because everybody knows I lied, but then we can run off together and be together. And she is so emphatically in love with him. And it's a really heartbreaking scene after everything that she's already been through.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think especially when she kind of runs to him and hugs him, and then you can kind of tell by his expression, does not return the hug, is just staring straight ahead. And the switch is crazy. Because like while he's on the stand and while she's giving testimony, he's like, oh no, my wife. Why hasn't she been here to, visit me, whatever. But the switch is so immediate for both of them. So yeah, it is really interesting that neither Power nor Dietrich got any nominations. Because I will say, like, I love Charles Laughton's performance, but I do feel like it's a bit more, like, it's more consistent throughout.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have these, grand reversals or changes. He is playing one character, like an interesting one, but still, I feel like the other two performances were probably more complex.
Yeah. And he and Elsa Lanchester have all of the really broad comedy elements, which is like, there's a point where he's doing something and then they take out a pair of like Bermuda shorts, these huge like plaid shorts. And he's just like, I can't believe you're bringing this out in court. And, and it's played for just the broadest possible laughs. And those, and Elsa Lanchester as Miss Plimsoll, where she's just harping on him constantly. They're both really, really slapsticky almost characters, like 90% of their presentation on screen, which we don't think of getting, awards from the Academy. The Academy hates comedy, like through and through.
Hmm. Yeah, it makes you wonder. It makes me want to go back and see if different types of actors were more likely to get nominated, or, was there more of an appetite for comedy? Similar to like the way our appetite for genre has changed and like no one's
Yeah.
really making like westerns anymore, for example. Kind of makes you wonder.
Yeah. Like,
Hmm.
especially in the last couple years of like the Oscars, where people are like, see, horror is good, is
Yeah,
good
yeah.
cinema. And you're just like, yeah, it's always kind of been there. But like, you're
Hmm.
right that they are giving horror and things like that. I still think we should possibly give murder mysteries slightly more attention, considering
Hmm.
they were so huge in the 1930s. You think of like Thin Man era where William Powell played a detective something like 50 some odd times on screen between Philo Vance and the Thin Man and like all these other ones where he's playing like one-off detectives. That man played a detective for like 25 years. And then what's really odd is that detective fiction and mystery fiction actually really fell off the screen in the 1950s. And so something like this is, obviously it's Agatha and she's already like a best-selling author by this
Hmm.
point. But I wonder, like, do you, what, like, why do you think like this was such a hit in the 1950s, like especially like post-war, where you're trying to actually throw sympathy on an East German woman?
Yeah, it is. It is interestingly complex. Like I do think it does feel very of the time in the whole, sort of anti-foreigner sentiment. But it's also, I feel like Billy Wilder is very clever about it, where he is able to like illustrate maybe the attitudes of the time, but also it's very kind of like not like tongue in cheek, but like you can kind of tell that he doesn't necessarily believe it, or there are kind of like different opinions. So like she, gets all this criticism. Everyone kind of hates her. She is very much like the villain, I would say, for most of the movie. But then by the end of it, you feel so much sympathy for her. And I feel like, you know, there's a bit of the same thing, but in reverse happens for Leonard Vole. So I think what was compelling about this movie, and I don't know if that's just a 50s thing or just across the board, is it's very psychological. And I think it focuses, like, yes, the mystery is there loud and clear, but it's very focused on how people lie to each other, how people in relationships lie to each other, how they lie to themselves. So it's very psychological. And I think that was probably compelling to audiences where it's like big reversal, post war, we come back, things have changed, we see the world differently, and this kind of plays to maybe some anxieties. I don't know if there's an element about like women's roles post war, if that's a bit
Yeah.
of a yeah.
There's so much going on here. And I at first thought that maybe it was produced in Britain where
Mm,
they weren't as held to the Hays Code as
yeah.
obviously Americans were, but it's a United Artists picture, which I think like I'm actually really surprised
Hmm.
by that because I feel like there are a lot of things in this that break the code where,
Mm,
they're not married and they're pretending to be married, but they're clearly in a sexual relationship. It's like you've been living as his wife, and we all know what that means, which, they're having sex outside of marriage. They are making a mockery of the court because she is openly perjuring herself. And we all know there's no dramatic irony happening. Like she is
mhm,
openly perjuring herself and proud to do it. She even says when she first meets the barrister, like, I will say this with tears in my eyes and everybody will
mhm,
believe me. And you're just like,
yeah.
oh my God, she's admitting to crimes, like, and
Mhm,
happily admitting that she's going to do them. And, the cops look silly, which is a huge thing. It's they're presenting evidence from this deaf little old lady, and under even the most basic of my cousin Vinny scrutiny, we find out that she doesn't have a hearing aid. She can't hear anything. She's demanding that everything she's saying is true, but we prove that it can't possibly be because she can't hear. We have all this stuff that really goes against code, and then, surprise, surprise, at the end of the movie, Marlene Dietrich's character stabs the man that she's supposedly married to and is in love with. And and Charles Laughton's character is like, I'm going to get you off the hook because this man's a piece of shit. And you're just like, hell yeah, Charles Laughton.
that was very cathartic. I mean, I feel like for all the drama that we got by the end of it, it felt very uplifting to me personally.
Right? Like this man is dead and bleeding on the carpeted floor of this courtroom. His new hotsy-totsy girlfriend is sobbing her eyes out. And then the barrister, who's like, I am the greatest defense lawyer that's ever lived. He's just like, yeah, that fucker deserved it. Like, they're just so happy that everybody is on her side at the end of this.
No, that's truly wild. I do wonder actually, because I was reading about differences between, I'm not sure about the play versus the movie, but the short story in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I read that Leonard Vole's death/stabbing was added to the movie, so that I think in the story he walks free. And I feel like as you were talking about the code, I wonder, because it's very like bad guy must get punished. So like maybe that's sort of the nod to the code where it's like, oh, he did a bad thing, so he gets punished. But then it still leaves us with the story of, you know, like Marlene and her very morally gray actions. And she's kind of painted as the good guy by the end of it. So, yeah. Well,
I wonder if she gets a pass because, you know, her whole thing is like, I have to marry this this man who's not, you know, he has to take her somewhere else because she's really desperate to leave East Germany. And so in the 1950s, obviously, Cold War is a colden. And she's like, I have to escape, like, you know, like Russian occupied East Germany. So like maybe she gets a pass for all of her desperate stuff because it's like a Cold War kind of thing, which, you know, again, doesn't often factor into how we think about the politics of movies now because we're so far out of it, or, you know, like then, you know, it ended in the 90s. So we have like, you know, a different understanding of the Cold War. And, you know, people even forget that Germany was divided. You know, the wall came down when I was a little kid. So like, you know, people even forget that there were two Germanys at a certain point. And, you know, East Germany was the one you really didn't want to live in. So she was like, I have to get out. So that you know, and she gets this like kind of like pass for desperation, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's possible. And then I think by the end of it too, it is revealed that she like did love him, did it all for love. So in a way, it is very much like a, you know, wife does good kind of movie, like when all is revealed. And so maybe that sort of saves her in a way. Because like one thing that sort of not confused me, but interested me was Charles Laughton's character and his sort of views on like morality, I guess, or like he had his like monocle test where he'd put on his monocle, which I thought was such a fun kind of idea. And then he had the, you know, the reflected light from the monocle he'd use that as like a lie detector test. And he did it on Vole and he did it on his wife. But he only chose to represent him because he was positive that Vole was innocent. And that was kind of his whole shtick. And, you know, he has this reputation for winning unwinnable cases, but it's because he like truly believes it. And so I wonder if that, well, I don't know, if he was just in a state of shock by the end of it, where he's like, oh my gosh, I believed in Vole, but he was wrong. And then the force of his sort of dismay makes him take this other approach to his wife. Like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Fuck that guy, you know, that kind of thing. We're back to that. But yeah, I found that really interesting too, because for all his cynicism and, you know, his barbs at the beginning, he's very like, maybe that's Agatha Christie's moralizing sort of little streak.
Yeah. No, it's funny because like when you were like, oh, I'm on a Billy Wilder kick. And I was like, yeah, I love Billy Wilder movies. I really do. But my brain always goes like to all of his screwballs. And because that's what Billy Wilder is really known for me. And then earlier at the top of the hour, you mentioned, you were like, oh, and Double Indemnity. And I'm super into his noirs. And I was like, right, he's one of the greatest noir directors of all time. He's absolutely phenomenal. And I actually kept waiting for this movie to pick a side between Screwball and Noir. And I was thinking that actually, like, what's funny about this is that it's a Screwball on either end with a Noir kind of shoved into the middle. And I was like, who is the Screwball couple in this? Because, you know, there's always a comedy of marriage or a comedy of remarriage in a Screwball. And then I realized it's Charles Laughton and Elsa Lanchester because he's so adamant about ditching his nurse in the first 15 minutes of the movie. And then by the end, she comes around and is like, no, I'm going to help you and commit to being in your life as like the nurse to the barrister.
Mhm.
And even though it's not implied that they're like a romantic couple, I was like, oh my God, the comedy of marriage of a screwball ends up with the barrister and the nurse becoming a team together. And I was like, of course Billy Wilder has that in there because he's the greatest screwball director freaking ever.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. No, it's so funny you say that because you're right. It's a screwball comedy with like a surprise noir center. And we could be here just talking about, Charles and Elsa's sort of repartee. And we could totally kind of skip out on the other stuff. Or we could just focus on the main storyline. So it's all so layered. And also when you mentioned the ending, I could almost see like a sequel, I feel like it's almost set up for that.
I'm glad they didn't because like I love just the image of Marlene and Dietrich's character just kind of like being led out in handcuffs with like that again, like platinum blonde, sort of like head held high. And she was so tall. She was like 5'9", 5'10". And she's the same height as all the cops who are like leading her away. It's just such a gorgeous image for her character to kind of be led on. And for everyone involved to be so resolute in helping her. No one wants to throw her to the wolves, which is a really, again, interesting sort of image and concept to leave on where, again, it seems somewhat antithetical to the fact that like we make fun of Agatha Christie all the time because like she is really very like prim and proper and she's so moralizing. Like she's so happy to be like that person is evil and should be just sent away to jail forever. There's really no equivocation in a lot of her books and a lot of her texts for like gray area. And I feel like this is the grayest I've ever seen an Agatha Christie like text being, represented.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that's what makes it really kind of unusual. At the same time, though, I did read that Agatha Christie called this like one of the best like movies based on her work, which I thought was major praise. And I wonder, I love the image of her watching the film.
Yeah, I know. Like, could you imagine? She's just like, aren't I a genius? Like, just eating popcorn. She's like, I'm so good at this.
That's so good.
I'm glad you brought it up earlier because normally I like to ask, like, could you, like, who would you cast in like a remake? And I don't know, like, Marlene Dietrich's character is definitely like the hardest person to think of like who to put in that place. Do you have any idea of like who could do the Tyrone Power kind of role?
For some reason, I was thinking like Zac Efron.
Yeah.
Like, because I'm thinking like pretty boy, but like older now. Maybe one of the like Disney kids.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Yeah. I love the Charles Laughton character so much. Like, I don't know if I could think of a sort of British actor to do it because I'm really just not as familiar with like older, maybe like 60s or 70-year-old British actors. Yeah. But I could see someone like Jeff Bridges pulling it off really well, even though he's, the dude.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny.
Where he's just kind of like very like put upon, like he's such an old man now. And like he just has that calmness about him, which I think is really interesting. That would blend it. Like the last thing he really did where he got tons of praise was the Western Hell or High Water, which I thought he was really, really good in. But, he just has that incredible sort of like centeredness to him or like that self-assurance that I feel like would go really well for like, I know who I am and I am the defense lawyer that gets everybody off. And it's such an interesting, like Perry Mason was like, I only defend the people I know are innocent. And it's like, every time you read or watch a Perry Mason, you're like, is this the time where he finally defends someone who's obviously guilty? And of course that never happens because we're allowed to have that fantasy. But like, I love the fact that he gets that sort of like shake to his core that he's defending someone who is so freaking guilty.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. That was really delicious, I think, at the end. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. Ugh, this movie.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, the one thing that I also wanted to talk about was the two women. Well, I guess there were more than two, three, but thinking about Dietrich versus the actress who played Mrs. French, the rich lady who gets killed,
Yeah.
Norma Varden. What I found really interesting was so like the typecasting is so different, where Dietrich is, the femme fatale, and we've already sung her praises, so like such an icon. But then with Mrs. Emily French, she is, she's this lonely older lady. She's very much like those are sort of the adjectives that are used to describe her. I was surprised to learn the ages of the actors who played the roles, that apparently like Power was in his like mid to like early to mid 40s when he filmed this. I think it was actually his last role because Spooky, he died of a heart attack
Oh,
after.
yeah.
So that was kind of sad. But Dietrich was like 56, I want to say.
Damn, she looked good.
Yeah. And then what's her name? Mrs. French, the actress who played her, is 59. So isn't that interesting?
Wow.
I feel like there
Yeah.
are probably like many other examples in Hollywood where you kind of have the typecast. And this is sort of, although I do think there is one snide comment where it's like, oh, you married him to get out of East Germany, you were older. Like I think we
Yeah.
get that a little bit, but it's so hard to tell because she looks so good.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, you see those memes all the time where they show photos of people, like kids, in the 80s, and, they're like, these are high schoolers. And it's like, they look ancient. And you're
Yeah.
just kind of like, yeah, we don't smoke anymore. So, like, our skin looks a lot better. And we don't look like we're 45 or like the assistant manager of a bank when we're, in high school. But Trump Power is kind of like, he's a rough early 40s,
Is, yeah.
He's got age in his skin. Obviously, he's lived through a war. I don't know how much fighting he did, but he lived through a war. And but Marlena, again, like she just has that. And I would not have guessed that she was actually a decade older than him in this movie. I really honestly thought that they were like of very comparable ages. And the fact, and again, at the end, when his like new girlfriend is like, you're years older than him, I was like, is she really? Like, or are you just being a snotty little 22-year-old?
That is true. That is also like a plausible explanation, I think.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, the woman who plays his snotty little girlfriend is an actress named Ruta Lee, and she is still alive. She is 91 years old.
No way. Oh
Good
my
for
gosh.
Ruta. Good.
Has she
for
been in anything?
She was one of the brides in Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, apparently.
Oh my gosh. I haven't seen that movie yet, but I've heard so many things.
Me neither. It's one of those ones where you're just like, huh, what was Hollywood on back then? Like, sometimes you watch those old musicals and you're just like, what an interesting culture begat this. Like,
Well, because you think there were multiple approvals, like this went
yes.
through many people.
Yeah. Or like, because it's also in color, like, the makeup is so interesting. And, thinking about this movie being in black and white, when it did have the capability to be in color, that is such an interesting choice to make. And I feel like they were really going for that, like, sort of noir vibe where it's like you want it to be black and white. You want it to be, he is guilty, he is not guilty. They are in love, they are not in love. And that's such an interesting choice to make for a movie that was like, it came out the same, like 1957 movies. There were plenty of like modern feeling movies at that time. I want to kind of look it up really quickly. Yeah. Of course, Wikipedia does not make this easy. There were more like modern feeling, like song and dancey kind of like colorful movies. And then you have this, which is like hearkening back to, the Maltese Falcon, even though there's no reason for that. It's so interesting.
It's very like shadow and light too, I feel like, from the monocle test to like all the shadows of him just kind of skulking the streets. It adds a lot of kind of drama. That's what he does. He's a skulker.
Yeah, he skulks. Yeah, Trump Power is just like really interesting casting for this because again, like you mentioned, like course, I hit my mic. I talked too much with my hands. Like you mentioned earlier that like he was so well known for being just like this pretty boy. And he was just like, oh, you know, like Montgomery Clift levels of like gorgeous, gorgeous young man. And then he's so smarmy and so craggy. And so it's just so impressive. Yeah, he was a handsome fella from Ohio. There was no way he was getting that English accent right. That was not going to happen. So I'm so glad they decided to keep him American.
I know.
Oh my gosh. Like, I don't think I would have ever sat down and watched this movie if you hadn't suggested it, but I just absolutely adored it. And I'm just so interested in like how it all came together and how Billy Wilder was like the perfect director for it. I can't thank you enough for suggesting it.
Oh my gosh, of course. I'm going to continue on my Billy Wilder kick after this. I think I probably still have about half of his filmography to watch, but I'm pacing myself very slowly.
What's your favorite movie that you've seen of his so far, if you can choose just one?
Ooh, probably The Apartment, actually. But it's also like the one I rewatched most recently. Because I mean, I love Double Indemnity. I loved Sunset Boulevard. I like laughed at The Major and the Minor, which is just ridiculous concept, but very fun. But I feel like The Apartment to me had the most kind of like complexity and felt very modern. So yeah, I didn't think I would choose like a non-mystery, but here we are.
Yeah, no. And talk about a guy who lived forever. Billy Wilder died in like 2002. Like he lived forever. So cool. Olesya, how can everybody keep in touch with you and your books and your work that's coming out?
The best place is probably Instagram. I am Olesya is online. That is my handle. I'm also usually online, so it checks out.
Awesome. And name your books again, just so everybody has them fresh in their mind.
Yes. So Glitter in the Dark, and my latest is Liars in Paradise. And you can start wherever, even though it's a series. So if you want the full lore, start with Glitter.
Awesome.